Donovan's eyes did not just widen. They trembled. The Platinum Lounge forgot how to breathe. Crystal light hung in the air like frozen rain. A champagne flute slipped from a manicured hand and shattered, the sound splitting the room clean in half. On the monitor, the balance sat there like a loaded truth. $47,362,819.14. For a beat, Donovan's mouth held a smile out of habit. It stopped halfway. The world narrowed into a thin, high-pitched ringing. The music, the murmurs, the soft clink of wealth all blurred and dulled, as if someone stuffed cotton into the room. Donovan stared down at the number the way you stare at a mistake you cannot undo. On screen, bold text hit like a verdict. They laughed until they saw the screen. Then the moment snapped back in time. The glass doors of Sterling Heights Financial Center sighed open, and Ethan Price stepped into the Platinum Lounge. The air was power cold, the kind that told you this place was not built for warmth. It smelled faintly of citrus polish and money that never sweats. Ethan's worn sneakers squeaked once on the marble. The squeak was wrong here. Too human, too loud, too poor. Heads turned with smooth, practiced curiosity. Not concern, not kindness. Curiosity the way you look at a stain on a white shirt. Ethan adjusted his backpack strap and kept walking. His fingers pressed into the fabric like he could anchor himself to something real. 3 seconds passed. Something changed. The room decided he was entertainment. A woman in pearls paused mid-sip. A man in a charcoal suit shifted his cuff, gold watch catching the chandelier light with a flash meant to be seen. A velvet rope stood to the side like a polite warning. At the counter, black granite shone like a mirror. In it, Ethan saw his own reflection, small, shoulders tight, trying not to disappear. Behind the counter stood Mr. Donovan, senior account manager. Suit perfect, hair perfect, smile perfect. A face that said, welcome while meaning prove it. Donovan's gaze dropped to Ethan's shoes, then the backpack, then back up. Can I help you, son? Ethan swallowed. His throat felt dry, like the room had taken moisture out of him. I need to check my account balance, Ethan said. A laugh popped somewhere behind him and tried to hide inside a cough. It failed. Donovan leaned forward, elbows on granite like he owned the world on the other side of it. This floor is for premium clients, he said gently, like explaining rules to a child. High net worth individuals. My grandfather said I have an account here, Ethan said. He told me when I turned 10, I could come see it myself. Donovan's smile sharpened on the word grandfather, then smoothed back into place. Ethan kept his eyes up. He did not blink. He passed away 2 weeks ago, Ethan added. For half a breath, the lounge hesitated. Grief was inconvenient here. Grief did not tip. I'm sorry for your loss, Donovan said, already stepping around it. But this is not the proper. The charcoal suit man laughed out loud, refusing to let sadness interrupt the show. He stepped closer, rested his forearm on the granite with lazy entitlement. The gold watch sat inches from Ethan's reflection like a trophy. Hey, kid, the man said, loud enough to share. Does your birthday money even cover the coaster up here? Laughter spread, warm and easy because it was not aimed at them. Ethan felt heat climb his neck. Shame tried to fold his shoulders inward. He refused. He nodded once, not in surrender, but in decision. Then please look at my documents, Ethan said. Donovan blinked. Your what? Ethan reached for his backpack. His fingers found the zipper. It caught. Just a second, just long enough for the room to savor it. Someone snickered. A whisper cut through the air. The charcoal suit man's grin widened like a knife. Ethan pressed his thumb into the metal pull until it hurt. He pulled again, harder. The zipper ripped open with a harsh tearing sound that sliced through the lounge. And then dead air. Not a pause. A vacuum. Even the classical music seemed to shrink. Ethan pulled out a plain plastic folder. Corners worn. Cheap. Human. He set it on the granite. Plastic slapped stone. Small sound. Heavy consequence. He slid it forward until it sat directly beside the gold watch. Worn plastic and polished gold, side by side. One reflecting privilege. One reflecting reality. My ID is inside, Ethan said. My account number. The letter. Donovan stared at the folder like it might stain him. He reached for it with 2 fingers, pinching the edge as if it were dirty. He glanced toward the crowd with a confident look that said, "Watch me toss him out." In the granite reflection, the charcoal suit man's grin floated twice, real and warped, still smug, still certain. Donovan flipped the cover open. Chandelier light struck the first sheet. Donovan's pupils tightened. His smile tried to survive. It failed. His eyes began to shake. A bead of sweat gathered at his hairline, the first honest thing his face had done all day. It broke loose and fell, a single drop splattering onto the black granite like a stain of panic. The ringing returned, thin and sharp. The room's sounds muffled, like everyone was underwater, like shock had swallowed the air. On screen, the text appeared at the exact instant the sweat hit stone. He just realized the boy owns the bank. Donovan's hand twitched. The folder slid a fraction of an inch as if it suddenly weighed too much. He looked down at the number, then at Ethan. Then, back at the number again, like reality had to be checked twice. And that was when the charcoal suit man made his final mistake. Still smiling, still ignorant, he tapped the plastic folder with one finger tap-tap like it was trash on his table. "Hurry it up, Donovan," he said, amused. "I don't have all day to watch this kid count pennies." Donovan did not laugh. Donovan did not even breathe right. His throat bobbed with a hard swallow. His jaw tightened, as if his mouth had forgotten how to form words. The charcoal suit man's grin faltered for the first time, not from guilt, but from confusion. In the granite reflection, his smile warped, bending into something uglier, something uncertain. Donovan stared at Ethan again, not with contempt, with fear, and the room, sensing the shift, leaned in. Ethan stood perfectly still, fingers resting on the edge of the granite, watching Donovan's face collapse in slow motion. Donovan's lips parted. Nothing came out. The ringing thinned until it was almost silence. And that silence promised only one thing. Someone was about to kneel. Donovan stared at the open folder as if the paper had turned into a live wire. His hands flattened on the black granite, palms down, bracing against the cold. The smile he had worn like a badge hung crooked on his face, stuck halfway between arrogance and disbelief. His eyes flicked across the lines again, fast, then slower, like rereading could change what was there. The Platinum Lounge had been a soft orchestra of clinking glasses and quiet laughter. Now it was dead air. Even the classical music felt far away, muffled, as if the room itself had pulled a blanket over its own mouth. Ethan stood on the other side of the counter, backpack strapped tight in his fist. He felt the weight of every gaze in the lounge pivot toward him, hungry and sharp. He was still small, his shoes were still scuffed, but the air around him had shifted, and everyone could taste it. 3 seconds passed. Something changed. The man in the charcoal suit still leaned close, gold watch catching chandelier light like a tiny spotlight. He forced a chuckle, trying to drag the room back into the old story. "What is this?" he said, voice smooth with contempt. "Some kind of little prank." Donovan did not laugh. He did not even look at him. Instead, Donovan's throat bobbed as he swallowed. His lips parted, and the word that came out did not fit the man he had been a minute ago. "Sir." It landed wrong, heavy, final. Ethan felt the title hit him like gravity, not flattery. Donovan said it again, quieter, careful, like he was afraid the wrong tone could detonate something. "Sir, may I see your identification again?" Ethan slid the laminated card forward. It was plain plastic, no gold edges, no dramatic seal. Donovan received it with both hands anyway, fingers suddenly respectful, suddenly human. He compared the name to the statement. His pupils tightened. A bead of sweat formed at Donovan's hairline, then clung there, refusing to fall. The charcoal suit man leaned closer, irritation sharpening. "Donovan," he said under his breath, "I have a meeting in 20 minutes. Tell me we're not doing this." Donovan's only response was a stare at the paper, like it was the only thing keeping his world from tipping over. He whispered, barely audible, "Catherine." Behind the terminal, Catherine looked up. She had the kind of calm that wealth trusted. She walked over with an unhurried step, but when she reached the counter, her eyes dropped to the page and stayed there. She read one line. Her breath tightened. Not a gasp, not a performance, a tiny catch, like a seatbelt locking when you stop too fast. Then she looked at Donovan. "That is not a standard account," she said. And in that instant, the room snapped even quieter, as if the sentence had pulled the plug on every background sound. No music, no murmurs, just the soft hum of air conditioning and the faint tick of a clock somewhere behind the wall. Donovan's mouth moved like he was trying to speak through water. "So it's real," he murmured. Catherine did not say yes. She did not need to. She pointed with her pen to a detail on the page, and Donovan flinched as if the pen had touched an exposed nerve. Across the lounge, phones rose in unison. Screens lit up, a wall of glass and curiosity. Ethan felt that wall press in. He hated it. He hated the way people only noticed dignity when it came with numbers. His hand tightened around the cheap plastic folder anyway, pulling it closer, like he could shield what mattered from the cameras. The charcoal suit man tapped the granite beside Ethan's folder, sharp and impatient. "Hurry up," he said loud enough for people to hear. "I do not have all day to watch this kid count pennies." His finger landed close to Ethan's folder, too close, claiming space the way rich people did. Then he smirked, as if the entire room belonged to him by default. Donovan finally looked at him. It was not anger. It was worse. It was pity. "Step back," Donovan said. The charcoal suit man blinked. "Excuse me." "Step back," Donovan repeated, and the authority in his voice did not feel like his anymore. It felt borrowed from something bigger, something official, something that did not care about a gold watch. The security guard by the velvet rope moved. Not toward Ethan, toward the charcoal suit man. The guard's shoulder cut into the man's space like a closing door. The message was silent and unmistakable. "You are not the center anymore." The charcoal suit man tried to laugh it off. He lifted his glass to prove he still belonged. His elbow clipped the rim. The drink tipped. Dark liquid poured over his cuff and slid down his wrist, spilling across the face of his gold watch. The watch flashed beneath the wet sheen like it was drowning in its own status symbol. A soft ripple moved through the lounge, half gasp, half satisfaction. The man's face flushed hot. He fumbled to wipe the watch, smearing the spill instead of fixing it. His confidence had nowhere to land. Donovan did not glance at him again. He leaned toward Catherine, voice tight, controlled panic behind every syllable. "Call compliance," he whispered. "Immediate verification. Quiet. Well, with please to do. Tax well." Catherine's headset came on. Her voice turned, clipped and professional. "This is Catherine at Platinum," she said into the mic. "I need compliance now. Priority verification. Yes, right now." Donovan turned back to Ethan. His tone softened, not kind, but careful, like someone realizing he had been holding a fragile thing the wrong way. "Sir," he said again, and the words still sounded strange in his mouth. "Are you here alone today?" Ethan hesitated. He pictured his aunt waiting outside, hands firm on the steering wheel, telling him not to shrink, not once. "I am here with my aunt," Ethan said. "She is outside. She told me to wait until everything was verified." Donovan nodded too fast, relief and fear tangled together. "That is very wise," Donovan said. "Thank you." He glanced at the wall of phones, the watching faces, the people who suddenly wanted a front-row seat to someone else's humiliation. "To protect your privacy," Donovan said, forcing the words through. "May we move to a private office?" Ethan held the folder tighter. "My folder stays with me," he said. "Of course," Donovan answered immediately. "Of course." The velvet rope unhooked as if it had never existed. A path opened, not out of kindness, out of fear. Ethan walked, sneakers squeaking against marble. The squeak sounded too loud in the silence, a small sound that made grown adults step aside. As he passed, a woman in pearls leaned toward her friend and whispered, barely more than air. "Price," she breathed. "No, that cannot be. The Price family." The name moved through the lounge like a rumor with sharp teeth. The charcoal suit man tried one last time to regain control, voice snapping. "What is your name, kid?" Ethan kept his eyes forward. Donovan answered for him, voice strained, as if saying it out loud made it more dangerous. "Ethan Price," he said. The office door waited at the end of the short hallway. Donovan's hand shook as he opened it. He stepped aside, posture almost bowing, and Ethan crossed into warm light and dark wood. The door began to close, cutting off the cameras, the whispers, the hunger. Just before it latched, Catherine's voice came through her headset, suddenly lower, suddenly serious. "Donovan," she said, "compliance is on the line. A beat. And you need to sit down." It start hubas does. Donovan sat down like his knees had forgotten the idea of pride. The office was designed to soothe the rich. Warm wood, soft lighting, a skyline photo that promised the world could be arranged into neat lines. Even the air felt filtered. But the quiet inside those walls was different now. It was the kind that listened back. Catherine stood near the side console with her headset on, posture straight, mouth neutral. Only her eyes gave her away, flicking from Donovan's damp forehead to the worn plastic folder on the desk like she was watching a fuse burn. Donovan pressed the speaker button with a finger that did not quite obey him. The click sounded too loud. "Compliance," he said, and the word came out thin. A hiss. A pause measured like a stamp about to fall. Then a voice filled the room. Calm, precise, a voice that never asked permission. "Compliance. Identify." "Donovan Hayes," he managed. "Sterling Heights, Platinum Lounge. I need priority verification. Beneficiary, immediately." Another pause. Longer. It made Donovan hold his breath without realizing it. "We have the account," the voice said. "This line is recorded. Chain of custody applies." Catherine's gaze tightened. Recorded meant there was no later version of the truth. Donovan's throat moved as he swallowed. His eyes kept sliding to Ethan, then away, as if eye contact could make the situation real. "Proceed," compliance said. Donovan forced the words out. "Identity confirmation. Full." "Confirmed," compliance replied. "Legal name matches. Date of birth matches. Guardian authorization on file. Beneficiary access confirmed." The room seemed to tilt, just slightly, as if gravity had shifted toward the boy. Ethan stayed on his feet. His hands were small on the edge of the desk, but steady. The desk's polished stone reflected a warped version of the scene. Donovan's expensive face, pale and sweating, next to Ethan's quiet silhouette like a shadow that refused to be pushed aside. Compliance continued. "This is a private trust with enhanced privacy protocols. No balance or structure is to be discussed outside a controlled setting. The beneficiary is to receive a sealed envelope attached to the account. The seal must be broken only by the beneficiary." Donovan's lips parted. "A sealed envelope." "Yes," compliance said. "Additionally, there are staff directives. If any third party interferes with the beneficiary, restrict access and contact security immediately. This includes private clients." From beyond the wall, a muffled laugh drifted in from the lounge. It sounded careless, like someone still believed the world belonged to them. Catherine took off her headset. It was not dramatic, just a simple motion, a quiet separation. She set it down as if she no longer wanted to be connected to Donovan's voice. Donovan didn't notice at first. He was staring at the desk as if the stone could tell him how to reverse time. Compliance finished. "Document the incident. A third-party auditor has been notified. Legal standby available. End." The line went dead. The silence that followed did not relax. It tightened. Donovan reached for his water with a hand that trembled hard enough to make the ice clink against the glass. The nervous little rattle filled the office like a confession. He wrapped his fingers around the glass but did not lift it. The cold on his palm seemed to anchor him in place. Ethan slid the plastic folder onto the desk. Its cheap surface scratched softly against the stone. The folder stopped beside a gold watch that belonged to Donovan, gleaming on his wrist like an unspoken threat. Plastic beside gold, worn truth beside polished ego. A bead of condensation slipped from Donovan's untouched glass. It rolled across the dark stone in a slow, shining line, creeping toward Ethan's folder like it was trying to cross a border. It stopped short. The water pooled there, trembling, held back by nothing Ethan could see and everything the room could feel. Donovan's voice broke when he tried again. "Ethan, the envelope is inside. It's for you." Ethan nodded once. He did not ask why. He did not ask what it meant. He simply reached into the folder with careful fingers, like he was handling something living. He found it. Thick cream paper, a wax seal pressed flat and clean. The handwriting on the front made Ethan's chest tighten before he even read it. His grandfather's handwriting. The kind of handwriting that never hurried. The kind that made every word look like it would still be here after you were gone. Ethan's breath caught, small and sharp. For a second, the office blurred around the edges, and all he could see was a kitchen table, a warm hand guiding his pencil, a voice that never had to shout to be heard. He slipped a fingernail under the wax. The seal resisted, stubborn as memory. Then it gave. The crack of it was quiet, but it cut through the office like a blade. Catherine did not move. She only watched, and the look in her eyes changed from shock to certainty, like someone witnessing a sentence being read. Ethan unfolded the letter. His eyes moved across the first lines. His face shifted, not into fear, but into something heavier. Understanding. Donovan leaned forward without realizing it, as if he could steal meaning from Ethan's expression. His fingers twitched against the glass. The ice clinked again. Faster this time, like his body was trying to run even if his pride refused. Ethan's voice came out low. He knew, Ethan said. Donovan's mouth opened, closed. Knew what? Ethan read a line, then looked up, and his gaze went straight through Donovan's suit, straight through the skyline photo, straight through the idea that this room was safe for men like him. Then Ethan read aloud. Do not trust the first man who smiles at you in a place like this, he read. Trust the one who panics when you ask for the truth. Donovan flinched as if the words had struck him. A thin sheen of sweat appeared at his hairline. One drop gathered, fat and real, and slid down his temple. It clung there, trembling, like it was deciding whether to fall. Catherine's eyes flicked to it, then to Donovan. The look she gave him was cold and final, like she was watching a man step onto a trapdoor. Ethan's fingers tightened on the paper until the corner creased. Something else was inside the folder, heavier than the letter. He slid it out. A second envelope. This one was thicker. The wax seal was darker, almost black. The paper felt stiff, official, like it had been waiting for the right moment to exist. A name was written across the front. Not Ethan's. Ethan stared at it long enough for the quiet to become unbearable. Under the desk, Donovan's polished shoes shifted. A small, helpless movement, the rich man's version of backing away. Ethan lifted his eyes. He looked at Donovan, not with anger, with certainty, and the drop of sweat finally fell, hitting the stone with a soft tap that sounded, in that perfect quiet, like a gavel. On screen, the words seemed to hang over the room like prophecy. The verdict is inside. Part 4. Ethan kept the second envelope open in his hands, but he did not rush. The private office felt colder than the lounge ever had, not because of air conditioning, but because everything in here was built for control. The dark stone desk did not just shine. It watched. It reflected every face back at itself, like the room refused to let anyone hide. Donovan sat with his elbows near the edge of the granite, trying to look composed. His collar was still crisp, his hair still perfect, but the panic lived in his body now. It lived in the tiny tremor at the corner of his mouth. It lived in the way his fingers hovered above his water glass without daring to touch it. Catherine stood near the console, headset resting against her neck like a badge she could put on at any second. She had stopped being Donovan's support. She had become a witness. Ethan lifted the first page again. The paper was thick, the kind that made even silence feel expensive. This is a complaint, he said, voice quiet and clear. It has your name on it. Donovan's eyes flicked down, then back up, as if looking at the page would make it real in a way he could not survive. He tried to speak, but his throat tightened and turned the first sound into something useless. Ethan did not press him. That was the cruel part. He just kept reading line by line, letting the words do what they had been made to do. The complaint described a woman who walked into a bank branch holding documents she had saved for years. A woman who did not look like the people in framed photos on the walls. A woman who had been treated like a problem before she was treated like a person. Ethan's finger traced a date, then another. The timeline was neat, the kind of neat that meant someone had already done the hard work. Donovan swallowed. His hand finally closed around the glass. The ice clicked. A nervous little rattle in a room that suddenly felt enormous. Ethan looked up for a second, just long enough to meet Donovan's eyes. Then he slid a second page forward. It was an internal memo, official letterhead, a signature block at the bottom that made Donovan's pupils shrink. Ethan read that name without hesitation. Price, Donovan's face went pale in a slow, sickening wave, like the blood had decided to abandon him. Ethan lifted another sheet. A transcript. He did not read the whole thing. He did not need to. He chose a line, the way you choose a knife. Subject refused service, pending verification, Ethan read. Donovan flinched at the word subject, not because it was aimed at him yet, but because it sounded like what he had turned someone else into. Ethan lowered the transcript and unfolded a personal letter tucked beneath it. The handwriting was steady, familiar, the kind of handwriting that didn't belong to anger. It belonged to planning. Ethan's eyes moved across the first paragraph. His breathing changed, only slightly, like he could feel his grandfather in the room again. He began to read out loud. "If you are holding this envelope," Ethan said, "then the test worked." Donovan stared at the paper as if it were a live wire. Ethan continued, "I did not leave my grandson only money. Money can hide a man's flaws. Money can excuse cruelty. So I left a standard, and I left a trap." Catherine's gaze shifted to Donovan. Not with shock, with recognition. Like she had just learned the truth about someone she had been forced to tolerate. Ethan read the next line slower. "Do not trust the first man who smiles at you. Trust the one who checks your documents and still treats you with dignity." Donovan's fingers tightened around his glass. The ice clinked again. Then he realized his hand was shaking so badly the sound was giving him away, and he stopped moving entirely. He held the glass like a man holding evidence. Ethan lifted the paper higher, letting the overhead lights hit the ink so there was no shadow to hide in. "My grandson is young," Ethan read. "That is the point. A child has no status to protect him. If your staff cannot treat a child fairly, your bank is not safe for anyone." Donovan's lips parted. He tried to speak. Nothing came out. Ethan's voice remained calm. "I left instructions," he read. "Not for vengeance, for accountability. If the gatekeeper fails, do not negotiate, do not excuse, do not delay." Catherine's hand moved toward the console, then paused. She looked at Ethan, just a fraction of a second, as if asking permission without asking. Ethan gave a tiny nod. Catherine pressed the button. A tone sounded clean, official. Then a voice filled the room through the speaker, calm enough to be terrifying. "Compliance," the voice said. "Confirm status." Catherine's posture straightened. Her words were precise. "Second envelope opened. Beneficiary present. Subject present. This isn't it. I've don't rated botted." Donovan jerked at the word subject like it had struck him in the chest. He forced air into his lungs. The sound of it was thin. "I'm right here," he said, but his voice came out small. "State your name for the record," Compliance said. Donovan's eyes darted to Catherine, then to Ethan. He looked like a man begging a child to save him from a machine. Ethan watched him quietly, the letter still open in his hands. Donovan's shoulders sagged. The last of his arrogance fell away, not dramatically, but like something finally too heavy to carry. "Donovan Hayes," he said. A pause. Then the verdict. Delivered the way a system delivers truth when it is done pretending. "Donovan Hayes," Compliance said. "You are suspended pending investigation. Effective immediately. Do not access internal systems. Do not contact clients. Do not leave the premises without security escort. Legal has been notified. A third-party auditor has been engaged. It is now the reading." Donovan stared at the desk. A bead of sweat formed at his hairline, slow and undeniable. It gathered, clung, then dropped. It landed on the black granite with a soft tick, spreading into a small, dark circle that looked like a stain he could never wipe away. On the reflective surface, the droplet mirrored his face for a brief second. A man watching himself collapse. Catherine turned her head slightly, not toward Donovan, but toward the invisible camera of the world outside this room, and gave the smallest nod. Not smug, not cruel, just certain. The bank had spoken. Ethan folded the letter carefully, like it was something sacred, and slipped it back into the envelope. His fingers were small, but steady. A heavy sound landed in the room, not from the speaker, but from Catherine's hand as she pressed the console again, ending the call. The click felt final, like a gavel in a courtroom. A knock came at the door. Measured, professional. Catherine opened it. 2 security officers stood there, calm, polite, already briefed. the kind of calm that meant the decision had been made long before they arrived. Donovan looked at them as if they were strangers, as if security had always been his weapon until it wasn't. Ethan stood and walked toward the doorway. Not fast, not eager. Each step was controlled, deliberate, and the soft squeak of his worn sneakers cut through the hush like a signature sound, a reminder that power did not always arrive with polished leather. The hallway beyond the door was bright. Glass walls, soft carpet, the world of the lounge just outside, full of people who had been laughing moments ago. A charcoal suit moved into view. The secondary man, the one who had been amused. He strolled closer with an effortless arrogance, carrying his confidence like it had never failed him. His gold watch flashed under the lights, but the face of it was smeared now, dulled by a faint stain where wine had dried, like a tiny punishment the universe had already started writing on his skin. He leaned into the doorway, eyes flicking past Ethan as if Ethan was furniture. "Donovan," he said, voice light, impatient. "Are we done wasting time, or do I need to watch the kid count his birthday money again?" Ethan stopped. He did not answer. He looked down, slowly, at the man's wrist, at the watch, at the dried stain. Then, he lifted his eyes. The man's smile stayed on his face for a beat too long, like a mask that didn't know the room had changed. Behind Ethan, Donovan made a sound that was almost a whimper and almost a warning. Catherine's voice cut through the space, calm as a blade. "Sir," she said, not to the man in the suit, to Ethan. And in that single word, the hallway shifted. Phones began to rise in the lounge again, a wall of lenses hungry for collapse. One of the security officers stepped, not toward Ethan, but toward the charcoal suit. The man blinked, confusion starting to crack his expression. Ethan did not move. He held the sealed envelope in one hand and his grandfather's letter in the other like two keys to two different doors. And as the man's arrogance finally hesitated, Ethan's gaze stayed steady, almost gentle, like he was deciding how much mercy to spend. On the granite desk behind them, Donovan's wet fingerprint still shone under the light, a mark left by a man who had just realized he was no longer the one who decided who belonged. And in the lounge outside, the air turned electric, because everyone could feel it. The next target had just walked into the doorway. The security officer did not touch the charcoal suit man. He did not need to. He simply stepped to the side and opened his palm toward the exit, polite in a way that felt colder than any shove. The gesture said, "This is not a debate." It said the building itself has decided. The man tried to hold on to dignity by speaking louder. That old reflex, that old spell. "This is insane," he barked, glancing at the phones. "You people are going to regret treating me like this." "Red." His voice echoed once, then died. The room did not answer. Even the air felt like it had rules now. Catherine stayed where she was, shoulders squared, headset resting lightly against her cheek. She did not look impressed by his anger. She looked tired of it, like she had seen this exact performance 100 times and finally had permission to stop applauding. The man's eyes snapped back to Ethan. Ethan was small in the way a 10-year-old is small, but he was not shrinking anymore. His sneakers were planted. His arms were around the envelope, holding it close, not like a trophy, but like a boundary. Phones rose higher in the lounge, a ring of glowing screens, a wall of attention. The man noticed the attention and attempted one last switch. His face softened into something that wanted to be charming. His voice lowered into a private tone, like he could still purchase the moment. "Kid," he said, forcing a laugh, "this is getting blown out of proportion. I apologized. Let's be reasonable." Ethan looked at him for a long beat. Then Ethan spoke, steady and quiet. "I did not ask you to apologize," Ethan said. "I asked you to say what you did, out loud." The man's jaw tightened. His gaze flicked to the phones again. He could feel the cameras waiting, hungry for a clean ending, a perfect clip. Ethan did not help him. The man swallowed. His throat moved like it hurt. He tried to edit himself, tried to choose safer words. "I said you did not belong," he admitted, and even that sounded like he was trying to make it smaller. Ethan did not nod, did not smile, did not soften. He just kept looking at the man until the next sentence became unavoidable. The man exhaled, defeated by silence. "I said people like you," he said, and his voice cracked on the last word. Like you are less. A few people in the lounge shifted. One phone dipped, then rose again. No one cheered, no one clapped. That would have let him off too easy. Ethan's eyes did not change. But something in his face tightened, not with hatred, with control. The kind of control most adults never learn. Now you can leave, Ethan said. It was not a command. It was a conclusion. The man stared at him, searching for a crack, a child he could intimidate, a way to turn this back into a story where he stayed the center. He found none. The security officer took one step forward, still calm, still polite, still terrifying in his courtesy. He did not hurry the man. He did not need to. The exit was waiting, and time was no longer on the man's side. The charcoal suit man took a reluctant step toward the door. His gold watch caught the light again. The stain on it made it look like a bruise. He lifted his wrist, as if noticing it for the first time. His face tightened with a flash of humiliation. A symbol that used to announce his worth now just announced where the wine had spilled, where his hands had shaken, where control had slipped. He tried to cover it with his sleeve. The phones caught that too. At the doorway, he paused and turned halfway, desperate for a final line. "This is not over," he said, voice thin. Catherine did not respond. Ethan did not respond. The man left anyway, escorted by that open palm, by that silent system, by the kind of order he had never believed applied to him. The door closed with a soft, final sound, not a slam, not drama, a quiet seal. For a moment, the lounge stayed frozen. Then the noise tried to come back. A murmur, a breath, a shuffle. People lowered their phones slowly as if the screens had grown heavy. Ethan felt the heat of their attention on his skin. He could not see a single face without also seeing a lens. The same people who had laughed earlier now wanted to witness him, to own a piece of him, to clip him into a story they could post. He held the envelope tighter against his chest, protecting it the way someone protects a memory from being turned into entertainment. Catherine stepped slightly in front of him, not blocking the crowd with force, but with presence. "Sir," she said softly, "your escort is ready." Ethan nodded once. He did not look at the phones. He did not look for approval. He turned toward the hallway. As he walked, his sneakers squeaked on the polished floor. The sound was sharp in the quiet, the same small sound as before, but it meant something different now. It was not embarrassment. It was a signature, a reminder that the smallest person in the room had become the one everyone adjusted for. He passed the marble pillars and the glass doors that reflected him back in fragments, a boy with a backpack and an envelope, moving like he had decided where he was going and nothing in the world could vote him out. At the edge of the hallway, he saw his aunt waiting near the entrance, hands clasped, eyes worried, trying to read his face. Ethan stopped for half a second, then walked to her. He did not speak right away. He just leaned into her side, small and human, like the weight of everything had finally found a place to rest. His aunt's hand came down onto his shoulder, gentle, protective. "Are you okay?" she whispered. Ethan looked once over his shoulder. The lounge was still there, full of expensive, quiet, expensive faces, expensive feelings. But it did not feel like a fortress anymore. It felt like a room that had been taught a rule. He turned back. "Yes," Ethan said. Then, almost too softly to catch, he added the truth that mattered. "I just do not want anyone else to feel small in a place like that." His aunt held him a little closer, and together they walked toward the exit. Behind them, the phones went dark one by one. And in that hallway, where power used to belong only to the people who never sweated, kindness finally had a budget. The next morning, the school hallway smelled like floor wax and old paper. The lights were too bright for how early it was, and the chatter carried that sharp edge it always had when people were bored and looking for a target. Ethan walked in with his backpack hanging from one shoulder, the envelope tucked deep inside, pressed against his ribs like a secret that still had weight. His sneakers squeaked. Heads turned. Not all at once, not dramatically, just enough to let him feel it in his skin. Whispers moved ahead of him like a cold draft. Some kids stared like he was a rumor made flesh. Others looked away fast, like eye contact could get them pulled into a story they did not control. A few smiled too hard, already trying to figure out what kind of smile he would accept now. Ethan kept walking. He did not look for Donovan. He did not look for the boys who used to block the hallway like they owned it. He kept his eyes on the scuffed blue lockers and the bulletin board that always had posters about kindness taped crookedly, like the school thought kindness was something you could announce and be done with. Near the corner, Jordan Davis sat on the floor, back against the lockers, one knee up. He was tying his shoes. The laces were frayed, and one sole was peeling like a loose tooth. Jordan glanced up and froze. His fingers stopped mid-knot. Ethan slowed down, then stopped a few steps away. The hallway went quieter around them, the way it does when people sense a moment and lean in without moving. Jordan swallowed. His eyes darted toward the crowd, then back to Ethan. He looked like someone bracing for the kind of joke that turns into a week of humiliation. Ethan crouched instead. Not too close, not invading, just lowering himself until they were the same height. Jordan blinked, confused. Ethan's voice stayed low. "Does it hurt?" Ethan asked, nodding toward the shoe. Jordan's cheeks flushed. He tried to hide the peeling sole with his hand like it was a crime scene. "It is fine," Jordan said quickly. "I can fix it." Ethan watched his fingers tug at the lace. Watched how careful he was, how practiced, like he had been solving the same problem over and over with the same few tools. Ethan reached into his backpack and pulled out a plain notebook. No fancy cover, no bold logo, just paper. He tore out a clean page and wrote slowly, the way his grandfather had taught him when words mattered. He slid the page toward Jordan. Jordan stared at it, then read. It was not a speech. It was not a threat. It was just a name and a place and a time. The counseling office. After school. Today. Jordan looked up, wary. "What is this?" he whispered. "A door," Ethan said. "If you want it." Jordan's eyes narrowed, still unsure if this was kindness or a trap. In this building, traps wore polite faces. Ethan held Jordan's gaze until Jordan's shoulders softened by a fraction. Ethan stood. His sneakers squeaked again, louder in the silence. As he walked away, the hallway sound returned in pieces. A few laughs tried to start and then died. A few whispers turned into coughing. The crowd did not know what kind of story they were in anymore. Ethan did. At lunch, he sat alone at the end of a table the way he always had, except now there was empty space around him like people were afraid of sitting too close and being judged by a camera that was not there. Across the cafeteria, a teacher was looking at her phone with a stiff face, thumb scrolling too fast. Another teacher leaned in, murmuring. The adults were pretending everything was normal, but their bodies told the truth. Something had shifted, and they were trying to decide whether to protect it or bury it. Ethan's aunt picked him up after school and drove him back to the building with the glass doors and the quiet that listened. Catherine was waiting in a smaller office this time. A room that felt less like a stage and more like a place where decisions became real. Her hair was pulled back. Her expression was composed, but her eyes softened when she saw Ethan, like she had been holding her breath all day. On the desk sat a folder and a simple form. No glitter, no ceremony. Just structure. Ethan's aunt read everything twice, lips moving silently, and then looked at Ethan. "This is the part where you get to choose," she said. Ethan nodded. Catherine slid a pen across the desk. "You can set rules," she said. "You can name where it goes. You can make sure it cannot be used to hurt people." Ethan's fingers wrapped around the pen. It felt heavier than it should have. He thought about Jordan on the floor with his shoe peeling open. He thought about the hallway posters. He thought about how fast a laugh can become a weapon. He wrote carefully, letters steady. Not a personal purchase, not a flashy gift, not a victory lap. A fund. For students who needed shoes and coats and lunch cards and quiet help that did not come with humiliation. For families who could not afford the field trips. For kids who learned early to make themselves small. Catherine watched his handwriting, and something changed in her face, like she recognized what kind of power this was. When Ethan finished, he pushed the paper back. His aunt exhaled like she had been holding air for months. Catherine took the page and nodded once, professional again, but her voice dropped into something sincere. "We can do this quietly," she said. "No announcements, no names unless you want them." Ethan looked at the blank space where a name could go. He thought about the envelope against his ribs, the way it felt like breath. "Put it under my mother," he said. His aunt's eyes filled instantly. She turned her face away, wiping quickly, like she did not want to make him carry her grief on top of everything else. Catherine paused, then nodded with a kind of respect that did not need words. "Under your mother," she repeated. "Under her name." Outside, as they walked back through the lobby, Ethan's sneakers squeaked on the floor. The sound followed him like an echo. But this time, it did not sound like a joke. It sounded like a promise. Catherine called after midnight, the kind of call that made a phone feel like a warning instead of a tool. Ethan's aunt answered on the first ring, but Catherine stopped her before she could even say hello. "Do not put me on speaker." The kitchen was lit by one tired bulb. The rest of the house slept in layers of quiet. A clock ticked with the confidence of something that still believed in routine. Ethan sat at the table in his socks, shoulders tucked in, a plate of food in front of him that looked like it belonged to someone else's life. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Catherine spoke fast, controlled, like she was trying to outrun the fear. "Someone initiated a compliance route toward Ethan's trust," she said. "Not an external breach, not a random attempt. It used internal credentials and the correct language. This was an inside job." Ethan's aunt tightened her grip. The phone creaked softly against her palm. "Inside the bank," she whispered. "Yes," Catherine said. And it was timed. It was submitted to force a response window. If you ignore it, they frame it as negligence. If you respond wrong, they frame it as consent. Ethan stared at the table grain. The wood lines looked like they were running somewhere, but every direction felt like a trap. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. A thin tone slid into the call. Not a beep, not static. Something smoother than either, like a key turning in a lock that didn't belong to them. Catherine stopped mid-word. Then a third voice entered, calm and faceless, the kind of voice that never needed to explain why it was there. "Line compromised," it said. "This call is now secured. Do not hang up." If this were a video, the text would slam onto the screen like a verdict. "Line compromised. Do not hang up." Ethan's aunt froze. Her eyes flicked toward the hallway as if she expected someone to be standing there, listening with their hands in their pockets. "Who are you?" she asked, but her voice sounded too small in the kitchen. "I am not the point," the voice replied. "The point is you are being watched." Watch did not feel like a word. It felt like a hand resting on the back of Ethan's neck. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Catherine returned to the line, steadier now, like someone clinging to a railing in a storm. "They are trying to move authorization into a lane where you will have to sign something," she said. "A document that looks harmless, a signature that turns into permission. They want a paper trail that says, 'You agreed.'" Ethan's aunt swallowed. The sound was loud in the quiet. "Why?" Ethan asked. The question came out before he realized he was speaking. His own voice surprised him. It did not tremble. It sounded like it had decided to stand up. The faceless voice answered as if it had been waiting for him. "Because money is not the only asset," it said. "Legacy is an asset. A name is an asset. Silence is an asset." Ethan felt his chest tighten, not from fear alone, but from the sudden weight of what his mother's name meant to strangers. If this were a video, a second line of text would appear, short and brutal. "They want his mother's legacy." Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Catherine's breath caught. "They are building a narrative around him," she said. "They want him on brochures. They want him under banners. They want him smiling in front of cameras so that if he ever speaks, they can call him ungrateful." Ethan's aunt's face went pale. "Clearview," she whispered, and it wasn't a question. Catherine did not hesitate. "Clearview," she confirmed. "There is a pattern." Pattern. The word struck something loose in Ethan's mind. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Images flashed behind his eyes like broken film. Glitchy, fast, sharp enough to hurt. A security camera mounted above a school hallway door, angled just wrong. A donor board in the main office, polished so bright it looked like it had its own light. Brass letters catching a smile. A ribbon-cutting photo with adults standing too close together. A familiar gold watch reflecting a chandelier like it owned the room. Donovan's badge. The charcoal suit man's grin. Not separate moments. One shape. One machine. Ethan's fingers moved without him noticing. He pinched a few crumbs near his plate, rolling them between thumb and forefinger the way kids did when they were pretending to be calm. He pressed down. The crumbs collapsed into dust. When he lifted his hand, a damp crescent of sweat remained on the wood, a small proof that his body knew the danger even if his voice stayed steady. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. The faceless voice lowered its tone, and the temperature of the call dropped with it. The same people who benefit when a child is powerless benefit when an institution stays quiet, it said. The same silence that protects bullies protects budgets. Ethan's aunt flinched, as if the voice had said her name. Catherine spoke again. Careful now. This is not a rumor, she said. Someone inside the bank pushed the request into motion. Someone with access to legacy accounts. Someone with authority. If this were a video, the text would be a warning label. The enemy is inside the bank. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Ethan's aunt's nails scraped the table without meaning to, a thin, ugly sound like a match striking. Scratch. Her bracelet slipped loose. A small charm fell and tapped the wood once. Click. That tiny click felt louder than laughter ever did. Ethan looked at his aunt. Her eyes were locked on the phone like it was a weapon pointed at their house. If we choose silence, Ethan said, what happens? The faceless voice answered instantly. You remain safe until you are not, it said. Silence buys time. Sunlight buys truth. Both come with a cost. Ethan's aunt shook her head, slow, already knowing that no option was clean. Who? Ethan asked. Tell me who. Catherine hesitated again, and in the pause, Ethan felt the size of what they were standing in front of. Then the faceless voice spoke, each word placed like a chess piece. Someone who profits when nothing changes, it said. Someone who benefits from your mother being a memory instead of a witness. Someone you know. If this were a video, the final line of on-screen text would appear like a dare. The final boss is someone you know. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Ethan's aunt's hand trembled. Not a little tremble, a violent one, like the muscles had quit cooperating. The phone slipped from her fingers and hit the table edge. Clack. Her water pitcher tipped. Not just the glass. The whole pitcher, heavy and full, spilling in one sudden rush. Water flooded across the wood, shining under the kitchen light as it ran toward Ethan's damp fingerprint. It reached the edge of his print and stopped. Not because physics stopped it, because the wood dipped just enough to hold it there, trapped in a thin line, a border, a boundary. Ethan did not move his hand. He watched the water tremble at the edge of his mark like it was afraid to cross. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Catherine's voice came through, soft but urgent. Are you still there? Ethan's aunt's mouth opened, but no sound came out. Ethan leaned forward. Say the name, he said. Catherine began to speak. Her lips shaped it on the other end of the call. A real name. A heavy name. And then the sound cut out completely. No syllables. No letters. Just dead air. The house held its breath. A thin, high-frequency tone appeared in the silence, almost too quiet to notice, but sharp enough to make Ethan's teeth ache. E. Ethan watched his aunt's face instead of the phone. Her pupils tightened. Her expression changed in a way that made her look older in 1 second. She looked at him as if she had just realized the world was not a place that happened to them. It was a place that hunted. Ethan lifted his eyes to the dark window. Not to the water, not to the phone, to the night, as if he could look back at whoever was watching. And in the dead air, the faceless voice returned, barely more than a breath. The truth cannot be reversed. Then the line went quiet again, leaving only the clock, still ticking like it had no idea what had just entered their lives. Morning came in thin and colorless, like the sun was trying not to get involved. Ethan sat at the kitchen table while his aunt wiped up what the night had spilled. The wood still held a faint tide mark, a pale curve where water had wanted to go farther and decided not to. His aunt moved slowly, as if speed might summon someone back into the room. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Catherine's text arrived first. Do not call me. Open the front door. Look down. Ethan's aunt froze. Her fingers tightened around the phone until her knuckles blanched. Ethan pushed his chair back and walked to the entryway. The house felt too quiet, not peaceful quiet, but the kind that listened. He opened the door. A plain envelope lay on the welcome mat like it belonged there. No return address, no handwriting, Just a single embossed seal pressed into the flap, matte black, clean as a closed eye. Ethan did not pick it up right away. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Across the street, a car sat at the curb, engine off, no one visible. The windshield caught the morning light and threw it back like a mirror that refused to show a face. Ethan bent down and took the envelope. It was heavier than paper should be, not because of weight, but because of intention. Inside were 3 things: a key card with no logo, a folded sheet that smelled like printer toner, and a second, smaller envelope, sealed again, with a name typed on it. His aunt leaned close, then stopped. Her breath clipped short, like it hit a wall. Ethan looked at the name. Silas Mercer. The name did not sound like a person. It sounded like a building. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Catherine's voice came through as a whisper when she finally called, and even then she kept it tight, like the air itself could be bribed. "Do you see it?" she asked. Ethan stared at the letters until they felt burned into his eyes. "Yes," he said. His aunt sat down hard, as if her knees had decided they were done pretending. Ethan did not ask who. Somewhere deep in him, the answer had already been forming for weeks. The donor plaques, the polished smiles, the way adults leaned toward each other when they thought children were furniture, the way certain names floated above consequences like they were too expensive to touch. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Catherine spoke like she had been rehearsing this in the dark. "Mercer is the chairman of the bank," she said, "and the chair of the foundation that funds Clearview. He does not just sign checks. He writes the rules that decide which stories get buried." Ethan's aunt pressed her thumb against the table and left a small crescent in the wood's sheen. "Why us?" she asked, but it came out broken. "Because your sister tried to change something," Catherine said. "And because Mercer does not forgive people for making him look ordinary." Ethan's throat tightened at the mention of his mother. Not grief alone. Anger, clean and hot, like a match held steady. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. The faceless voice returned without warning, sliding into the call like it owned the line. "Proceed to the location on the page," it said. "Bring the sealed envelope. Bring no additional devices." His aunt jolted, eyes darting to the corners of the room. "Who is this?" she demanded. "A safeguard," the voice replied. "A witness. And the only reason you are hearing this before it becomes public record in someone else's hands." Ethan looked down at the key card. The folded sheet contained one address. Not a street Ethan recognized, but he could picture it anyway. A place with glass walls and polite silence. A place where people used soft voices to hide sharp things. His aunt's hands shook when she reached for the envelope, then pulled back as if it might bite. "We should go to the police," she whispered. Catherine made a sound that was almost a laugh, except it had no joy in it. "Mercer funds half their campaigns," she said. "He sits on boards that decide who keeps their badge. If you walk into daylight without armor, you do not get protection. You get targeted." Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Ethan stood up. He was still a child. His sweatshirt still hung loose. His hair still refused to lay flat. But something in his posture changed, the way a small flag changes when the wind finally commits. "What is in the sealed envelope?" he asked. Catherine hesitated. Then she told the truth like it was a blade she did not want to hand him. "It is your mother's file," she said. "The one that never made it into the official archive. The one someone removed before the memorial flowers died. It includes a list of names, and the signatures that should never have existed." Ethan's aunt covered her mouth. Her eyes shone, not with tears yet, but with the pressure before they fall. Ethan held the small sealed envelope with Mercer's name on it. "And this?" he asked. Catherine's voice lowered further. "That is the trigger," she said. "If you open it in the wrong room, the wrong people will know you opened it. If you open it in the right room, it becomes a key, a public key." Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. The faceless voice spoke again. "There will be a meeting today," it said. "The foundation will be at Clearview. Press will be present. Cameras will be welcome." Ethan's aunt stared at the phone like it had grown teeth. "They want him on a stage," she whispered. "They want him smiling." "Exactly," Catherine said. "They want to wrap him in their story before he can tell his own." Ethan looked at the faint tide mark on the table, a boundary that water could not cross. He placed his palm flat on the wood, right on the mark, and felt the cool grain under his skin. He imagined his mother's name carved into a plaque, his mother's voice reduced to a slogan. His mother turned into a picture that made other people look good. His fingers curled. Not tight enough to crush anything, just enough to decide. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. "We go," Ethan said. His aunt's head snapped up. Ethan met her eyes. "But we do not go to smile," he said. "We go to make sure nobody can mute the truth again." Catherine exhaled, slow, as if she had been holding her breath since the moment she learned the name. "Then, you need one more thing," she said. "Proof that Mercer cannot edit." "What?" Ethan asked. Catherine's voice went quiet, careful. "A witness in the room who is not on his payroll," she said. "Someone who will say it out loud." Ethan's aunt swallowed hard. "And if we do this," she whispered, "we cannot go back." The faceless voice answered for all of them. "The truth cannot be reversed," it said. "Only delayed." Outside, the car across the street finally moved. Slow, casual, like it was just going somewhere. Like it had never been watching at all. Ethan slid the sealed envelopes into his backpack, zipped it closed, and felt the small finality of the sound. Then he looked at the front door. Not as an exit. As the first step into daylight, the gym smelled like fresh paint and old sweat, the way places did when adults tried to make them look innocent. Clearview had dressed itself for company. Banners hung from the rafters with words like partnership and excellence. A long table near the bleachers held sparkling water, neat stacks of glossy programs, and a wall of donor logos printed so large they felt like they were watching. Ethan walked in beside his aunt, his backpack sitting higher on his shoulders than it needed to, like he wanted it closer to his spine. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. A camera light blinked on. A reporter smiled too quickly, the kind of smile that meant someone was already drafting a headline in their head. Ethan's aunt tightened her grip on his hand, then remembered herself and let go. She did not want to look like she was dragging him. She also did not want to look like she was letting him go. Across the gym, a small stage had been built. A podium, 2 microphones, a line of chairs behind it for people in tailored suits who would clap at the right moments. And in the center, like the room had arranged itself around him without admitting it, stood Silas Mercer. He looked exactly like the kind of man who could ruin someone with a phone call and still sleep well. His hair was perfect in a way that did not feel human. His smile was calibrated, not warm but profitable. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Mercer's eyes found Ethan, not with surprise, with recognition. Ethan felt it in his ribs before he understood it in his mind. The look was not, "Who are you?" It was, "There you are." His aunt's breathing went shallow. Mercer began walking toward them, slow, confident, the way people walked when they expected the world to move out of their path. A staff member stepped in front of Ethan, holding a clipboard like a shield. "Sweetheart," she said, practiced and bright. "The student seating is over there. Families in the back." Ethan did not answer. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the key card, the one with no logo, and held it up between 2 fingers. The staff member's smile faltered. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. She glanced at the card, then at Ethan, then at Mercer, as if she had been told to watch for something and had never believed it would happen. Her throat moved as she swallowed. "This way," she said, and her voice dropped an octave. She led them along the side of the gym past a door marked "Staff Only." The words were printed in red. The door handle was polished from years of people believing they belonged behind it. The card clicked. The lock released. Behind the door, the sound of the gym dulled, as if someone had wrapped the world in thick cloth. A hallway stretched out, fluorescent lights buzzing faintly overhead. The hum felt like a warning. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. A second camera appeared at the far end of the hall. Not a school camera, smaller, newer, pointed too precisely. Ethan's aunt noticed it too. Her shoulders tightened like a flinch she refused to complete. The staff member stopped at a room with a narrow window and a keypad. She did not look at Ethan when she spoke. "They said to keep you off the main floor until the chairman is ready," she whispered. Ethan stared at the keypad. "Ready for what?" his aunt asked, her voice scraping at the edges. The staff member's eyes flicked to the ceiling, as if she expected speakers to answer. "For the photo," she said. "For the story." Ethan's fingers brushed the zipper of his backpack. He did not pull it. Not yet. His aunt leaned closer to him, almost shielding him with her body, then stopped herself again. She was trying to be brave the way adults were taught to be brave, by pretending fear did not exist. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. From the far end of the hall, footsteps approached. Hard soles, measured pace, not a teacher rushing, not a student wandering. 2 security guards turned the corner. Not school security. Their suits were too clean, their earpieces too discreet. One of them glanced at Ethan's aunt, then at Ethan. And then, without speaking, he shifted his stance so his body blocked the door back to the gym. Ethan's aunt's hand rose to her necklace, fingers trembling against the chain. Her nails scraped lightly, leaving a faint line of sound. Ethan looked up at the guard. "We are not leaving," Ethan said. The guard's eyes did not change, but his jaw tightened like he had just received instruction. The other guard pressed a finger to his earpiece. "Mercer wants the boy in the green room," he murmured. The word boy landed wrong. Small, dismissive, familiar. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. A voice came from behind them, calm and sharp, like a paper cut. "Do not move him." Catherine stepped into the hallway, her hair pulled back, her expression controlled. In her hand, she held a slim folder with a plain cover. No logo, no school crest. Nothing to reassure anyone. The guards stared at her. Then their eyes flicked to the folder. Catherine did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "The meeting starts in minutes," she said. "If he disappears into a room with only your cameras, your microphones, and your edits, then the story belongs to Mercer. If he stays in public, the story belongs to the truth." Ethan's aunt exhaled like she had been holding her breath since the moment they walked in. The guard with the earpiece hesitated. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. From the gym, applause erupted, a cheer that sounded rehearsed. Someone had stepped onto the stage. Catherine's gaze dropped to Ethan's backpack. "Do you have it?" she asked softly. Ethan nodded once. Catherine's eyes lifted to the security camera at the end of the hall. Then she looked back at Ethan, and for the first time her composure cracked just enough to show urgency. "You have one chance to say it where it cannot be muted," she whispered. Ethan's fingers closed around the zipper. Not pulling yet, just holding. In the gym, Mercer's voice rose through the walls, muffled but confident, carried by a microphone Ethan could not see. The hallway light flickered once, and then Ethan heard his own name, spoken on a stage like it was a gift. His aunt's face went pale. Catherine's hand hovered near the folder, ready. Ethan finally pulled the zipper down. The sound was small, but in that hallway, it landed like thunder. Mercer's mouth opened, and for a fraction of a second it looked like he might still try to charm his way out. Then he saw the phones. Not a few. A sea. A silent wall of glowing screens held at chest height and eye level, steady as headlights in fog. 1,000 lenses that would not blink when he did. He wet his lips. The microphone caught the soft sound of it, obscene in the quiet. The voice from the speakers stayed calm, almost bored. "Chairman Mercer," the voice said, "comply. Step away from the minor. Surrender your device." Mercer tried to smile again, but the muscles did not listen. The smile came out crooked like a mask tugged off halfway. He turned his head toward the principal, looking for an ally, a nod, a distraction. The principal's face had gone pale, his hands hanging uselessly at his sides as if applause had been a language he no longer knew. Mercer looked for the board members in the front row. He found them frozen, eyes wide, lips pressed tight. No one rose. No one spoke. It was not written anywhere in the room, but Ethan felt it hovering in the air like a verdict. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. The nearest guard stepped forward and raised his hand, palm open. Not a fist, not a shove. A polite demand that felt more final than violence. Mercer stared at that open palm as if it were an insult. His phone was in his pocket, heavy, personal, a life raft and a weapon and a mirror all at once. He had spent years holding that rectangle like it made him untouchable. Now it looked small. The crowd did not boo him. That would have been a gift, something he could argue against. They only watched, their silence turning his breath into something loud and weak. Mercer's fingers slid into his pocket. His hand trembled enough that the microphone caught the faint rasp of fabric. He pulled the phone out slowly, as if speed might make the moment real. The guard did not reach for it. He just waited. Mercer's eyes flicked to Ethan. Ethan was standing beside the podium, small shoulders square, hands resting on paper that looked ordinary and somehow heavier than the banners behind him. Ethan's face did not celebrate. It did not beg. It simply held. Ethan had the kind of stillness adults only found after loss. Mercer swallowed. His throat bobbed like a failed lie. He placed the phone into the guard's open palm. The guard closed his fingers around it without triumph, then stepped back as if returning a library book to its shelf. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. Mercer's power was gone, and the room felt it, not with noise, but with a change in posture. People leaned in. Shoulders rose. Breaths paused. The voice from the speakers continued. "You will answer one question," the voice said. "Clearly. For the record." Mercer's eyes darted to the device on the podium, the small light still glowing. He looked at Catherine, but she was no longer standing beside him in the way employees stood beside a boss. She stood closer to Ethan now, a fraction, like a compass needle finding north. Mercer's jaw flexed. He tried to speak, and only air came out. The voice waited him out. Mercer exhaled through his nose, the sound sharp, angry, frightened. He leaned toward the microphone again, as if proximity could bring back control. "This is a misunderstanding," Mercer said, and even he seemed surprised by how thin it sounded. The room did not move. The voice did not argue. "The question?" the voice said. Ethan lifted one page and held it higher so the nearest cameras could catch it. The paper did not shake. Ethan's eyes met Mercer's once, just once. "Tell them," Ethan said softly. "Say it out loud." Mercer's nostrils flared. His gaze slid across the crowd, hunting for sympathy. He found only witnesses. Another 3 seconds, something shifted. Mercer's shoulders sagged, not like a man humbled by conscience, but like a man realizing the walls had teeth. He leaned in. "It was an inside job," Mercer said. The words fell into the gym and did not bounce. They landed. They stayed. A ripple moved through the crowd, not loud, more like a collective breath finally allowed. A few people pressed their phones higher, as if trying to hold the sentence in frame. Mercer blinked hard, too fast. Ethan did not smile. Ethan's aunt made a small sound from the bottom of the steps, like a sob strangled before it could become embarrassment. She put her hand over her mouth and kept it there, eyes shining, shoulders tight. Catherine's gaze stayed on Mercer, steady and almost sad, as if she had known this moment was coming and had been counting down to it in silence. The voice spoke again, even, relentless. "State the purpose," the voice said. "Why was the minor brought to this stage?" Mercer's lips parted, and for a heartbeat Ethan thought he might try to twist it again, to paint himself as the hero of a story he had poisoned. Mercer's eyes flicked to the donor banner behind him, and Ethan saw the reflex in his face, the old habit of hiding behind a logo. Then Ethan's hand moved. Not fast, just deliberate. He slid the document forward, closer to the microphones, and the small scrape of paper on wood sounded like a door locking. Mercer stared at it. His voice dropped, hoarse. "To use him," Mercer admitted. "To make it look like we helped. To protect the funding. To protect me." A murmur rose, then died, swallowed by a heavier quiet. Again, nothing appeared on the walls, but Ethan felt the truth of it. The room itself had become a machine that would not let Mercer rewrite the moment. Mercer's face tightened. Something hot and ugly moved behind his eyes. He looked at Ethan, and the old arrogance tried to crawl back up his spine. "You have no idea what you just started," Mercer whispered. Ethan leaned into the microphone, voice clear enough for every phone to capture. "I know exactly what I started," Ethan said. "That is why you are scared." Mercer flinched, like the sentence had struck him in the teeth. Another 3 seconds. Something shifted. The guards moved closer, not rushing, not dramatic, just inevitable. One stood at the stairs, another stood near Mercer's shoulder. The principal backed away from the podium without realizing he was doing it, as if the air around Mercer had turned toxic. The voice returned, calm as a gavel. "Chairman Mercer," the voice said, "you are suspended pending investigation." Do not contact staff. Do not contact donors. Do not contact the minor or his guardian. This concludes the secured line. The speakers clicked. The room did not erupt. It held its breath as if sound itself would be disrespectful. Mercer stood there with nothing in his hands and nowhere to place his gaze. He looked smaller now, not because Ethan had grown, but because the lie had collapsed and left him exposed. Ethan closed the hard case. The click was quiet, but it felt like punctuation. He gathered the papers, careful, like they were not weapons but something older and more fragile. His aunt stepped forward at the bottom of the stairs, tears finally spilling. She reached for his hand like she was reaching for a railing in the dark. Ethan took it. He did not look back at Mercer, not once. As he walked down the steps, his sneakers squeaked again on the polished floor. This time the sound did not betray him. It announced him. And the crowd, 1,000 silent witnesses, made a narrow path without being asked, phones held high like a corridor of judgment. Ethan walked through it, hand in his aunt's, eyes forward, leaving the stage behind as if it had never belonged to anyone at all.